Hi, and welcome to another episode of Risky Business Podcast. I'm Amber Bernard, and this is
David Schwanagrodsky.
And we're here to talk about coronavirus or COVID-19 again. Yesterday we released a video on how we were maintaining our positive energy and different rituals we were doing to keep busy and positive during this time. But today we can't ignore it. We need to talk a little bit more about COVID-19 in terms of stats and different trends and news that's been going on in the world. And I mean, we want people to stay positive, but we also want people to be informed, right? So to start that off, we're going to start off with some stats from the World Health Organization, also known as WHO, and some of the things that they're saying. So basically, over 187 countries are affected right now by the COVID-19, and almost 300,000 cases are confirmed. That number could be higher because those are just confirmed cases, and a lot of the symptoms now they're describing either don't show up at all in people who are carrying it, and they could be infecting others, which is why yesterday we kept stressing, self-isolate, wash your hands, don't touch your face. I know I keep touching my hair to move it out of the way, but I washed my hands before this. So like we said, again, it seems to be a very smart virus, and so just keep following your public health advisories wherever you may be. And so when we were on WHO, also known as World Health Organization, we learned about the origins and
Wuhan wholesale street food market. So
yeah,
possibly originated from bats or little pygmy armadillo source that kind of mixed in. So whatever was mixed in with their lack of quality control with the markets, whatever got mixed in there might have jumped from these animals to humans. So originated from food.
Yeah, exactly. So like he said, it's originating from a seafood market in China. That's what the World Health Organization kind of concluded and suspects. And so we wanted to learn a little bit more about markets, and we learned something about wet markets, which are common in China, according to this global news article we found and some of the videos we watched on YouTube. And basically, wet markets are places where they store and cage live animals that are usually wild.
Exotic animals,
exotic animals, to buyers who pick what animals they want to basically eat, and then they kill those animals on the spot. And so this brings people to animals we normally wouldn't be interacting with naturally, and that is spreading what they're saying, causing viruses to jump between species, so from different animals to humans, and that these types of environments, wet markets, which aren't really that regulated or sanctioned, I guess, properly according to what we saw online in China. And so it's creating a prime environment for new and infectious kind of viruses and diseases to just spread and become, quite frankly, lethal, right? So that is an interesting topic that I really didn't hear about prior to some of the trending news we looked at today.
Yeah, it just kind of blossomed from there. So it was just where it originated from and what's the pandemic, what they're trying to alleviate with the new virus spreading.
So exactly. So they're just trying to figure out different ways to alleviate it, like he said, and different people in China and places where wet markets are common and popular, they are calling on the government to basically monitor and better assess them.
And then eventually lockdown. So I think to flatten the curve, I think they're realizing that it's social interaction. Curfews might need to be in place, more stringent, and a lot more restrictions.
And that's exactly what they did in Wuhan. Is they heavily made sure everyone's on lockdown. They made people stay inside, and now apparently from the news we read is that there's no more new cases coming out of Wuhan. Because they did exactly what people are calling for people to do, is to lock down, make sure it's illegal basically for you to leave your house, kind of a thing, unless you have to go get grocery or go see the doctor. And again, like we also read about fast pandemics versus slow pandemics, and we basically want to be in the slow pandemic.
Yeah, that's what that last video is. The top trending video was explaining in their cartoon. It was basically a high spread. Fast spread would be enormously dangerous for economy and frontline healthcare workers, because most of them would get sick as well too, and that would also just jeopardize the health of everyone and make it worse.
Exactly. So in order to do that, we have to follow advisory, self-isolate, wash your hands, don't touch your face. If you cough into your like elbow, shoulder, like this, and just make sure if you're showing any symptoms that you do the right thing and you self-isolate so that you don't get anyone else.
Yeah, just more restrictions on yourself.
Yeah. And while we were doing that, we noticed different types of terminology out there that I was a little confused with. David had a little bit more education around that, and I didn't know what epidemic or pandemic really meant. I was like interchangeably using those two terms. So maybe do you want to explain to them what that means?
Yeah, epidemic is just locally, so it's just within a nation, and then pandemic is cross nations, so it's global.
Yeah. So epidemic localized, and pandemic basically mean it's been globally affecting multiple countries.
Yeah, so I mean, it's just more self-awareness for everyone instead of just focusing on a certain nation or place far away. Now it's kind of getting everyone uncomfortable because the spotlight's back on them now. Yeah. So, but it just means more restrictions, more positive focus into what they can do.
Yeah. And I mean, apart from some of the news that we've been reading, okay, so this started at a seafood market, so it seems to start with food. And David brought up a really good point. His like kind of like 2 cents about that was it's going to end with food.
Yeah, it's the route in with this was food. I think they did a pretty good research on it. They say they didn't. WHO says they didn't really confirm it, but I mean, there's a lot of sources that say it started with food cross-contamination. Just look at the guidelines, and 27 out of the 50 people went to the Wuhan seafood market.
Yeah.
And that's just a very good sign that it did come from food. So the route out of it would be food. Just more focus on that, like healthy nutrition, maybe restricting yourself from food. There's a lot of good science out there that says, there's a lot of uncomfortable approaches to what is healthy. But you can either take that route or take a comfortable route of Cheetos on the couch and get the worst of the brunt end. But it's forcing. I think that's the solution out there, is just get out of it.
I agree. And I mean, eating healthy might feel like you're restricting yourself to like comfort and tasty treats, but I mean, you have to, I think, shift your focus and realize that while it might not taste good, it is good for you. And when you eat badly, like heavily processed food and kind of junk food, comfort food, that you're actually like hindering your body's ability to properly fight anything that you might catch. And so we're no doctors, but I mean, it's pretty evident.
It's just a lot of research out there, and I think people innately know that restricting yourself is kind of a good way to go about it, instead of just giving in to just your desires and what you think tastes good right now instead of later on. So
so stay hydrated.
Stuff like that that everyone kind of knows, but it's just a shock to everyone because now they really have to be a good example instead of just more self-awareness, I guess.
So some of the top trending videos we saw was a video from 5 years ago from a TED Talk that Bill Gates was talking about. It was kind of cool because it was a little bit prophetic, and it's like definitely reflecting what's happening today, even though he talked about it 5 years ago. And what he said in that video is that the biggest threat to humanity isn't a nuclear war, it's a pandemic. And we thought that was kind of cool that, it kind of prophesized into today's reality. And what they basically said was, in order to prepare for that, which I don't think anyone really listened to him.
No, it was just because it seems so different. so out there that
Yeah.
it was just not an issue at the current time. So I mean, what else could the money be spent towards to?
Right, and so he made a good comparison about what first world countries, some of their priorities, specifically US, is to focus their finances and money and make sure that their military is well equipped and well resourced and taken care of. And that is not a critique of how they're spending their money in terms of like on military stuff. Like that's not what the issue is. The issue is, why aren't we going to do the same thing to the healthcare system and making sure people who are vulnerable, he specifically said that like single mothers and vulnerable populations who are impoverished should have greater accessibility to healthcare. It shouldn't be dictated based on what type of job you have, what type of health insurance you have. There should be some sort of universal type of healthcare access for everyone in any type of living situation or lifestyle they have. And he basically said, you know, the military is so well equipped, and like not just in terms of like supplies, but in terms of, you know, their research is like funded. They are briefed on the latest training. They're prepared for basically a nuclear, like they're prepared for war and they're ready to go. But in terms of our healthcare system, it's not ready and prepared to. I mean, look at Italy and China. They built 2 hospitals because they didn't have the capacity to take care of sick people, right? So he basically just said, in order to fix this and to stop this from happening again, which I agree with, is we should be giving more money to the healthcare system to help everybody and to medical researchers to prepare for this, right?
Yeah, research and development. So now it's just a matter of flattening the curve and just self-isolating so we can give them more time to now catch up, I guess. Exactly.
And it's just really, really interesting, really weird. It kind of prophesized. I mean, definitely. I mean, that was a very highly educated prediction, and I trust his opinion and his predictions, of course. And in terms of like trending news and things like that, to a little bit more of like the wishy-washy side, I guess you can say. I didn't really brief Dave on this before talking about it, but there is this psychic who said, her name was Sylvia Brown, I think. She's long gone now. She had died, but in one of her books, I think, which was like either a decade ago, like people are starting to talk about online, is she said that in 2020, a strange respiratory virus or illness is going to affect the world globally, and then it'll disappear just as quick as it, you know, appeared, and then it'll come back in 10 years.
So basically going from there is just her predictions. Hopefully that helps with flattening the curve and just making everyone self-aware so that we can just reduce this quickly.
Exactly. So take care, follow your health protocols, and this podcast will be changing a little bit. I'm moving back to Nova Scotia and I have to quarantine once I get there for 14 days. I'm not sick, but I want to make sure I don't get anyone else sick. So while I might not be here, Dave will be here to conduct interviews, and then we will transition to video conferencing podcasts.
Yeah, practicing self-isolation being a good examples.
And adapting. So thank you so much for tuning in again, and we hope to see you next time. Bye.
Ciao.